Good afternoon, colleagues. Must I say Amandla? Great. It's really lovely to see all of you. Many of you whom I know, and it's, I think, a great occasion, Russell, to have brought this meeting here to this place. A lot of us got lost. So we thought we knew where we were going. But it's almost symbolic that we got lost. But really nice to see all of you colleagues. What I'm going to do is talk to what I hope is a small slice of what these issues are all about. So I want to say, by way of introduction, that I'm not going to be talking about protest methodology, right? So this is not a question, this is not a session in which we talk about the merits of this approach or that approach. I'm essentially trying to put in this presentation what I think is the significance of what has happened over the last while into perspective. And of course, if you'd like to, we can have a conversation afterwards, and be very happy to us to more freely talk about a wider range of issues. But I really want to concentrate on the significance of what has happened. So I'm not going to be making any judgments about approaches that have been taken over the last 2 years. Important a subject as that might be. So I'm going to move essentially in 4 phases through this presentation. I have far too many slides. I have almost 50 slides, and so I have 45 minutes. I'm going to race through some of them, and so you must please forgive me. Some of them I can get through quite quickly, but some of them are a little conceptual, and so I'm going to ask you to pause along with me at particular points. So I'm going to start with giving you a narrative of what happened. Now, I'd like to do that quite quickly. After I've done that, I want to attempt an explanation about what had happened. In a third part, I want to concentrate on what I think the significance of all of that is, and if we have time, and please keep an eye on me, Russell. If we have time, we'll talk about what to take away from this for thinking about the future. So this is the first part. This is the narrative. And of course, it begins at UCT. Many people here will remember Chumani Makwele throwing the poo at the Rhodes statue, which leads to a train of events which is quite dramatic. I don't know if any of you were there when this statue was brought down, but it was an incredible occasion at UCT. Part of that process then also includes this occupation at Bremner, another occupation at Avenue House in May, and then the explosion into the country. In a very short period of time, Rhodes Must Fall multiplies, and you have student organizations emerging at Rhodes, Wits Black Student Society, Open Stellenbosch. I was quite fortunate myself. I had a front row seat to a lot of what had happened. I was at Rhodes, for example, when the students were beginning to think about what it is that they were doing. And so it was a real privilege for me to have been there. So I've been able to be present at many of these events, including this second Higher Education Summit, which happened in Durban in October 2016. 2016, and I'll show you some photographs in a moment, was incredibly dramatic. Parliament was stormed, there was a march on Union Buildings, a march on the Tuli House, and all of these were quite unprecedented in their scale and their significance. I watched a great deal of this. I had the real distinction of being able to look down on this thing as it was happening almost in front of me. And it came to a high point, and I'll show you the photographs in a minute. It came to a high point with President Zuma making the announcement about the cancellation of the fee increases for 2016. Just very quickly, just give you an update. The system as we speak right now, there is stuff going on at almost every single institution in the country right now. It's low intensity stuff in relation to what had happened last year, but as we speak around the country, the universities are under a great deal of stress, and you would be correct in saying that the system is teetering right now. There's one university that is closed. Walter Sisulu University is currently physically closed. The students were sent home a couple of weeks ago. We had an occupation at Bremner a couple of weeks ago. At the University of Venda, there was a protest over meal grants. Now, I deliberately put to you this cross-section of institutions, because you have in this cross-section of institutions here both what I would call elite universities and historically black universities. And the important thing for us to, and we can talk about it, is that what happened in 2015 has a much longer history, which you can trace back into the early parts of this century, where there were regularly, and we never paid attention to them, regularly things that were going on at institutions. Just some photographs very quickly, really dramatic photographs. I have a wonderful collection of these, and this moment is absolutely iconic in the experience of being at UCT and being a member of the UCT community. Lots of wonderful stories about what happened to roads immediately after this particular event, which I think all of us would be very interested to hear. I will not tell you the story. It was really intense. The university went into alternative mode. There were lots of discussions happening outside of the formal curriculum. The UCT campus was often blockaded and closed down. And then you had this national, as I said, development. This is at the Union Buildings. Quite an extraordinary occasion this was. And this is this moment when the gates of Parliament were semi-breached, not quite, but the students broke through the main gate and were on the precincts of Parliament, and it was quite an extraordinary day. Important thing to say is that in the course of 2016, all of this was viral in a sense, that it had jumped its, if you like, genesis in Cape Town and had gone countrywide. Now, so that's just a little bit of a quick narrative. How do we explain what happened and what has happened over the last 2 years. I'd like to take these next few slides to put forward an explanation. And this is, in some ways, is at the heart of what this presentation is all about. The last line there, point number 3, is the critical point. I'm making the argument here that we've seen the tipping over of the system, the higher education system, from being an elite system to becoming a mass-based system. And what I'm going to do in the next few slides is try to explain to you what that means. Now, a lot of people, when they talk about the higher education system, they will use this word massification, but they never explain what massification is. I'd like to put massification into what you might think of its full sociological context, because sociologically, something has happened. Something has happened which, and this is the connection, is the only time I'm going to say this, Russell. Since 1994, an incredible thing has happened in this country. And that incredible thing is the growth of the black middle class. Now, our sociological analysis don't often enough go and engage with that particular reality. In 1994, the African middle class counted in the region of 350,000 people out of about 41 million people. I mean, that was the size of the African middle class. When we now come to 2014, that middle class has grown to, and there are lots of arguments about how to make this measurement, that number has grown to either 4 million or 14 million. And this is the big shift, the big sociological shift that has happened in the country. And it's happened in the universities too. And it's this point that I'd like colleagues, I'd like us to really hold on and to come back and to explain. In 1993, African enrollments were 191,000 students. Work that I've done and many other colleagues have done have helped us to understand that between 1993 and 2013, African enrollments in the higher education system increased by 261%. The numbers are absolutely incredible. While that, of course, has happened, the professoriate, the teaching core of the university remains largely white. Many of you would have heard Bladen Zamande complaining about that in his budget speech the other day, saying that he was going to institute an inquiry into why the system is still so white. And so this is an important reality alongside of this point about the massification that I spoke about that we need to be keeping in mind. So white members of the academic staff still count and constitute the majority of academic members that are there in the system. So I'm going to be using the work of a man called Martin Trau to try and explain what this tip over is all about. And the value of this work of Martin Trau is to help us understand that what's happened here in South Africa has actually happened elsewhere in the world before. That the events of the last 2 years here have precedence in many parts of the world where you've had transitions in university systems, and I'm going to be using these 3 terms, from elite to mass to universal. Okay? Moving from elite to mass universal. And what he says, that when those transitions happen, you have incredible turbulence each time a system goes through a process of change like that. And I'd like you to please follow me, because what I'm putting in front of you now is a 1-page table which Martin Trau uses to isolate and pull out the issues that are pertinent when a system is in this process of transition. The first issue is access, and I'll come to that. The second issue is the functions of what a system is all about. The third one is sorry, I've gone too far, is the curriculum issues that arise when a transition happens. There are institutional characteristics that you need to keep in mind, and there are issues, call them issues of governance, where the decision-making inside of institutions are. So I go back a little bit, and I say to you, really concentrate on those two columns which describe the elite and the mass. So an elite system, to describe an elite system, an elite higher education system is when only something like below 15% of a population is able to go to a university. And our South African higher education system has for a long time been an under 15% participation system. Mass systems are systems that are anything between 16 and 50%. I don't want you to concern yourself with this category here of universal. We're a long way away from that. It's these two around elite and mass. And what Martin Troe helps us understand is that if you're in an elite system, in terms of access, you have access as a privilege of birth. Or as you might have variations of that, of talent. When a system moves to being a mass system, then admission systems with admission scores, such as we now are very preoccupied about, are very significant. So your qualifications in a straight meritocratic process are what you need to be looking at. When it comes to these functions in an elite system, the elite system is essentially there to shape the minds of your rulers. It's to shape the minds of the dominant, to be able to prepare the dominant to be able to exercise this responsibility of ruling. That's what an elite system is all about. Mass systems are much more about empowerment, about the passing on of skills. The way in which the curriculum is structured in a mass system follows essentially that kind of Oxford, Cambridge, very structured kind of way. Mass systems, such as we have, are modular. You can do a course here, you can do a course there. The whole thing is broken up into a very much more, if you like, consumable, usable form. Elite systems, and this is in terms of the characteristics of elite systems are homogeneous systems. They have largely people from one kind of background inside of them. Mass systems have people with a whole range of histories and experiences coming to the university. Elite systems are run by the professors. The professors are the decision makers. They constitute in their Senate the people who will decide what will happen. Mass systems have a great deal of outside interference, outside involvement. Sorry, I shouldn't use that word interference. Outside involvement inside of what happens inside of the university. Now, when it comes to standards, elite systems pride themselves on really high standards. Mass systems, such as you would have in the United States, you'd have the spectrum from extremely specialized institutions like MIT, Harvard, Stanford, and so on, to institutions whose names that you will never know, and they all exist in that spectrum. Just to emphasize the point that I made about access in elite systems are based on merit. In mass systems, you've got some degree of often affirmative action kinds of measures which are placed in them. So, just to recap, so where we are now, in 2005, the participation rate for the whole 20 to 24 age cohort was 12%. It's now gone to 16.3%. So we've tipped over now. We've just tipped over. The whole system has now, if you like, become a mass system. And we've seen an increase from, in 1993, there were 190,000 African students in the system. Now we almost have 1 million students that are in the system. So that's the big point, colleagues, that I'd like to leave with you. That's the issue that I think underpins what is going on. Our system is now having to cope with people who traditionally were not allowed into the system. The system is now having to come to terms about what it should be with constituents that were not there before. So the old system was of lecturers teaching their children. I mean, that's essentially how it was. Now, lecturers have no idea who these young people are. And they're in a completely different space. And sociologically, it cuts to the heart of what has happened inside of the country. And it's this, that I often, in talking about this, say we quite have not yet come to grips with and understood properly. I'd just like to close this particular section by saying to you that there have been some really interesting analyses of how this new mass system is coping. The Statistician General the other day, and Ahmed Bauer, the CEO of University of South Africa, made this quite extraordinary comment in bold at the bottom here. So we now have all of these new numbers inside of this system, but performance and throughput rates are extremely high. So at the moment, and I'll just throw this out to you, almost a third of students, African students in particular, who start the university will not survive to the end of that particular year. Almost a third. And Ahmed Bauer, in looking at those statistics, makes the comment that our throughput success now, in 2015, is lower than it was in the 1950s. Quite extraordinary as an assessment of what is going on. It's not what I'm here to talk about, but just to make that particular point. Now I come to the third part of what I'm talking to you about. And using those categories which Trau had listed, I put these 6 questions as questions which constitute the significance of what's going on. I make the argument that one of the major issues that this transition is raising for us is this question of what should the South African university be? I mean, that's the major question. Ancillary to that is who should be coming to it? Who should teach inside of the university? What should be researched? And what is the responsibility of the university to its context? Now, I raise all of those things, and of course, all of them have incredible implications for the constitutional commitments that we made with our constitution in 1996. Commitments around equality, the commitments around dignity, and around freedom. All of these issues are material as we are making this transition, as we are moving into this mass system. All of those things arise as issues which we have made promises about in our constitution, and which are now issues which arise in relation to these 6 points here, which I'm drawing attention to. Now, let me come to these 6 points. The first point is, I think we're in an incredible moment of confusion of what we want the South African university to be. And those of you who may be interested in following the debates about higher education will hear people saying very different things about what the university should be. From a societal perspective, we have people saying that you send your children to get the skills to be able to go and get a job. I mean, that's what the university is all about. The other people who will make the argument that the university is fundamentally, and if you like, this is the old view, that the university is fundamentally about building critical capacity, the capacity to be able to think clearly. The other people who make the point quite deliberately that the university right now should be producing patriotic South Africans. And this is a position that arises. You hear it in the ruling party, in the ANC, regularly. Why are these people so unpatriotic? And of course, you also have people making the argument that the university should be about Africanizing knowledge. I'll come back to that in a minute. But it's also a real question about what the university means for individuals. And those of you who have opinions about this, I think will generally say that that period of 3, 4, 5 years that you may have spent in the university would have been the most significant period of your life. It would have changed you in really incredible kinds of ways. And I think we're having to pose that question now quite deliberately about how it is that we want the university to be able to play that role of fulfilling young people's potential. Now, as we're thinking about this question of what we want the university to do, the protest movement and people in the protest movement are saying quite vocally and quite loudly, and it's this photograph here. I'll show it to you. Our parents were sold dreams in 1994. We are just here for the refund. And this is a strong idea which is brewing in and amongst the students in thinking about what this university should be doing. Now, I don't have the time to be talking to you here, colleagues, but I just want to say to you that there is a massive, massive debate going on inside of institutions right now about this. And it really is important that all of us should be participating in this debate. Again, I've had the really good fortune of being able to go around the country talking at institutions around this particular question. And it's alive. It's alive from fields like engineering to, of course, fields like the social sciences. And in that argument, you've got people who are saying, burn the whole thing down. Burn it to the ground. And let's start all over again. And we'll be better off than we are now. And people are making that kind of argument. But there's I think, a deeper argument which I'm asking all of us to be a little more attentive to, and it's about racism. It's about pain. It's about the way in which the experience of being inside of the university is being felt by many people. And I'm going to quote Biko here a couple of times, because I think many people are saying that this institution to which they have been going and have been formed in, that this institution has been complicit in the reduction of their own dignity. And it's a really powerful voice which I think we have to be paying attention to. It's created a civilizational moment, and there's a lot to talk about here, of what I call doubt, where people doubt themselves as a result of their social experiences. They look at white people and they immediately kind of have a sense of anxiety about what that relationship with white people might mean. And so Biko is very useful in all of this. And he asks the question, and he's relating it to these institutions like the universities. He says, look, go there to the middle of it. He says, what makes the black man fail to tick? Is he convinced of his own accord, of his inabilities? Not his abilities, his inabilities. Is he a defeated person? And here's the big point that he makes. He says, to a large extent, the evildoers, and he's talking about apartheid, have succeeded in producing at the output end of their machine, he's talking about the university, a kind of black man who is man only in form. Very recently, Mampela Rampela has just put out a new book about her life. And I took a quote out of that particular book. She says, believe me, when I tell you that there is black pain, she says, believe me. Don't ask me to explain it, but just believe me. Believe me that it's there. So what I'm saying to you, colleagues, is that in thinking about what this university is all about, that thing by itself is a major issue which we are going to have to pay attention to. I'd be very happy for us to talk a little more about that a little later on. It's very, I know it's close to the surface for a whole lot of us. It touches raw nerves. It makes us nervous. But it's really something that I think that we need to be thinking about. So I'm going to move on from that to these questions about access to the university. The fees issue has raised the question of who should have access to the university, and it's a deeply important issue in relation to the commitments that we've been making in the country around access to education and free education. But the big point is this point here that I'd like to leave here at the bottom here, this last point here, and I need to explain this, which says that the university cannot reproduce the race, class, gender privilege that exists in the wider society. The way in which the elite system worked in the past was that all these elite structures, these hierarchies that you had in the wider society, came to be reproduced inside of the university, right? The university, if you like, mimicked the elite patterns of the wider society. What I'm saying to you now is that in terms of this question of access, we can no longer have that. You can't have your elite status simply determined by, and by the way, we are not going to avoid this question of the university being an elite space, okay? You're never going to get away from that. So to think that the university can be anything else and I'd be very happy to argue with you around all of this, is a mistake. It's elite in the sense that it is made up of people who have the capacity to think in particular kinds of ways, right? Think the way in which a physicist might think. Not everybody can think like that, right? Doesn't make that physicist better than anybody else, right? But the physicist enjoys an elite status, if you like, in relation to me, who cannot think like that. In relation to my physicist friends, Tim sitting over there, I know you're close. You're close enough, Tim. You're close enough. So the university must be made of the best thinkers, and that's the point about the elite. The best thinkers in their particular field. So not everybody can be like that. Not everybody. It doesn't make you better, as I say. It doesn't make you better, but not everybody can be specialists of that particular kind. So all I'm saying to you here is that we are obliged now. We're obliged to be going out to find ways of disrupting the way in which physicists were reproduced. That the physicists would only come out of the ranks of the social elite. So we've got to disrupt that relationship between the social elite and the academic elite. They can't be the same thing. What should be taught? So here's the big buzz thing that is on the radio every other day, decoloniality. What are we talking about? We're talking about what's being taught currently inside of the university. And the point is absolutely simple, and I'll put it like this. The point is being made in this decolonial argument that validity only exists as it comes out of Europe. I mean, that's the point. That there is no valid knowledge outside of that particular experience. What the decolonialists are saying, that it is really important to be able to understand that insight, knowledge, wisdom can come from anywhere, and that it is our obligation to decenter, and that is what decoloniality is all about, the centrality of this idea that Europe is the beginning and the end of what our intellectual imaginations should be all about. It's very simple. It's fundamentally about the way in which, and when you look at the way in which the university system was established here in this country, it was established on the delegitimation of other people's understandings. And we're needing to bring back the legitimacy of forms of knowledge which continue to circulate in the everyday. Right now, there are people who are able to explain and make sense of reality with logics that you don't know. And it's really crucial for us to be able to bring the validity of those logics to be tested. As much as we want to test European knowledge, so we also must be testing, other forms of knowledge. Who should teach? The whole point about the professoriate at the moment is that it's largely white. I want to say to you, it is incredibly difficult to shift this. It is incredibly difficult. So in fields such as I work, in history, I'll tell you right now, if we need to be filling a history professorship position anywhere in the country, and we want to employ a person of color and more, a person would be classified African, we would have difficulty. We would have real difficulty. Walter Sisulu University has been struggling for the last 10 years to mount an honors course in history. Can't find the people. I mean, it seems almost obvious that would be the case. So there are real difficulties, and these are the legacies of apartheid. And so you look at these possible pools on which we may draw, and we have real difficulties. So we are needing to build pathways into the academy. We're needing to find ways in which to attract, hold, and promote people, into the system. What should the system research? I'll say to you, it's absolutely important for any university anywhere in the world to be defending and protecting academic freedom anywhere in the world. It's absolutely crucial. But you'd like to think that people have a sense of the urgency of the context in which they find themselves. And so while we want to encourage academic freedom, we must be finding ways in which people can pay more attention instead of to the psychology of cats, which you have people doing, to taking a real interest in why it is that poverty persists to the degree that it does, inside of the country, and to make that an important psychological analysis. So how do we get our colleagues around the country to come to understand the urgency of where we are? If you have children, please talk to them. Talk to them. Talk to them about what is important. Of course, you must allow them to do what they want to do, but talk to them about these really urgent things from which we cannot run. So I'd like to bring this to a close by saying to you that where we are now is that we're having to think really hard about what the relationship of the university should be to the spaces in which we find ourselves. So some years ago, of course, when all of these mergers were going on, and the question arose of whether UCT should be merged with other institutions, there was a lot of anxiety. With some people making the argument that, you know, this place that is called UCT really should be called the University of Rondebosch. We had to be quite explicit, and this is why coming here is so important. We had to be quite explicit, and I had the job of going around, you know, talking to people in Mitchell's Plain and so on about why they should be coming to UCT and why it would be important for them to think of UCT as their place, as part of the Cape Town that they know. And so we're in a really important moment in thinking about the relationship of our institutions to our local communities. Very happy to say to you, I don't think I'm talking recklessly now, colleagues. At UCT over the last 10, 15 years, the degree of engagement with the communities of Cape Town has been absolutely extraordinary. Much greater than any other institution. Sorry, Diane. Much greater than Stellenbosch. And it's an absolute reality. So we've done audits at UCT about this kind of work now, and then I'll tell you that we went to go and do an audit on people doing work on poverty. There were 60 projects going on inside of the university at the time of the audit, you know, related to these questions of poverty. So UCT has a complicated relationship. It's moved on in complicated kinds of ways. So I'll say this, I'm no longer ashamed to say that I'm a member of UCT. I used to be, I no longer am. I'm quite happy now to tell you I'm a member of UCT. I'm not embarrassed to say that to you, because I think we've moved on in important kinds of ways. I'd be very happy to talk and argue that out with some of you, but I have the interests of the institution at heart, because I think that really important work is happening there. Now, I'm going to skip those slides there and say to you in closing that the elite model of the university that we've been working with is no longer desirable or sustainable. We need new approaches. The challenge that we have, and this is not something that is peculiar to South Africa, it's very hard to find a model or a system somewhere in the world that we can easily look at and say, let's build a system like theirs. This Chinese system that is emerging right now, where something like 2,000 universities were established in the last 20 years. This Chinese system, which is emerging, you know, right now, is largely modeled on the European-American system, okay? Largely. These big questions, which we're talking about here now, which we are raising here now, they are not raised, they're not deliberately addressing. The system has tipped over into becoming a mass system in China. But the point that I'm making to you is that we have no blueprints. There are no models elsewhere in the world which we can simply go to and say, let's be like them. I mean, what we're having to do here is to work this out ourselves. And working out ourselves, I think, is going to require us to do quite hard things. The first thing that we are going to have to do, and this is I know controversial, we're going to have to look at this pain of it's racism, sexism, and all of these things, and think about how what we teach from accounting right through to fine art, how our teaching engages with this hurt, whether it's residual, whether it's new hurt, which people are bringing with and coming into the classroom with. I'm going to say what Mampela said, it's real. People are sitting there hurting. And we have to find ways of talking to that hurt. It's very different to when I was at UCT. And one of my colleagues made that clear to me the other day. She said, when we were at UCT in the 1970s and the 1980s, we knew we were there under sufferance, right? We knew. And that clarified things for us. It made it pretty straightforward. We knew that we wouldn't go and play soccer on the soccer field. We wouldn't go and jump into the swimming pool. We wouldn't go for when the residents would have a gala dinner. We wouldn't go. We just knew. So it was pretty clear where we stood. It's different now. It's completely different. When I go to visit when I used to be there, visit the residences, some of my students would say to me, Professor Soudien, so which res were you in? Where shall I start? And so that whole history has not been experienced and digested. But they go and sit there and they are experiencing, if you like, the institutional residue of when I was there. There's residue from when I was a student there. And all I'm saying is, and this is part of this decolonial thing, all I'm saying to you is that the work that we do at the university, and so I don't go for all of these rhetorical flourishes about, teach me about my past and so on. We have to teach fundamentally to where people are and the difficulties they bring into that learning, that learning experience. It's a real teacherly moment which is required now. So one of the extraordinary things that I think that we're having to come to terms with is the degree of mental challenges like depression which students are experiencing on the campus. And we don't understand that. We have no ways of understanding what that is all about. But it's also, and that's the second last point there, colleagues, it's about when those students come into the classroom, it's working with the full range of strengths which our students bring into that classroom experience. The way in which, and you, Julie, you know a little bit about this. You're working with academic development stuff a little bit. The way in which our academic development approaches generally have been working on universities to stigmatize students. You black, you're not good enough, and so you must go and take this supplementary course. It's got to be far clearer that students come with a lot of things that they know. They know things that you don't know, right? They have capacities that you still have to develop and that you still have to come to. And we need to be working with all of these things that these students bring. A lot of our students come into the university with language ability that you might not have. They have a relationship with the natural environment that you might not have. There's a lot of stuff that they bring that we completely ignore. And what I'm saying to you is that in this remaking of this experience, we have to be working with the full range of skills, insights, capacities that the students have. And that's the only way, and that's going to bring me to this last point, that's the only way in which we come to a sense of our humanity. We come to a sense of what it is that we as human beings are all about. When we are able to share what we have, right? To share what we have. But to share it in a way which allows you to speak back, to be able to say, I hear you, but, and to use the word but. So not to be patronizing and to say, oh, brother so-and-so is saying and so, let's listen and that's the end of the story. The sharing is also about receiving. So the wonder of the university, and this is what we have to be igniting, And it's an extraordinary thing, and many students know this. When that light bulb goes on in your head because somebody has helped you in critical kinds of ways, with things that you didn't know fully, didn't understand properly, and that person is in that position of trust to be able to say to you, I hear you, but when that process begins as an ignition inside of your head, it's the most amazing experience which a student can go through. And a lot of our students never have it. They never have that kind of moment of being in the space of wonderment. And this is what the university is all about. And we've got to be finding ways in which to try and make this happen. And it can only happen when I bring my whole being in a relationship to your whole being. Not half of my being, not half of my capacities, all of my capacities. And when we can have discussions about our capacities. And that's where we are wanting to go. And I want to say to you that we have to be in a really almost experimental way trying to find out how we do that. How we do that with these complicated histories that all of us bring to this experience of learning. And we've never been there. And I'd like to close by saying to you, when we get there, we will realize what an incredible place, what a privilege it is to be in this time and space. What a privilege it is to be in the time and space of all of these things which we have closed our eyes to, delegitimated, and refused to acknowledge in the past. Out of it will come who knows what. Who knows? And that's this wonderful thing, colleagues, that I really would like us to all urge that we work towards. And I'll stop on that note, Russell. Thanks.